Welcome, everyone. As you are joining, if you wouldn't mind utilizing the chat function, let us know who you are and where you're joining from today. All right. My name is Amber Ham. I am the Training and Outreach Coordinator with Kentucky Spin. And we're going to go over just a few housekeeping items before we jump into today's topic, which is our Lunch and Learns mental health awareness, identifying needs in students. So, a little bit about Kentucky Spin or Kentucky Special Parent Involvement Network. Since 1988, when Kentucky first received a Parent Training and Information Center, or PTI, the U.S. Department of Education, we are funded by the U.S. Department of Education under the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act. We are the one and only PTI center for the state of Kentucky. The center provides training, information, and support for children and youth with all types of disabilities, birth through 26 years old and beyond, as well as their parents, families, and professionals that assist them along their journeys. It is very important to know at Kentucky Spin, we do not act as attorneys. We are not attorneys. We do not legally represent families or give families legal advice. With that being said, we empower families to advocate for themselves as well as their children by utilizing a peer-to-peer model of support. This helps families access the needed information and resources that they may need. A brief disclosure about today's training. This is not a TOT or training of trainers event. Kentucky Spin does not authorize other agencies, organizations, or individuals to train this material. This presentation is for educational purpose only. All third-party recording and streaming are strictly prohibited. All rights for use are reserved by Kentucky Spin Incorporated. And I also want to give another disclaimer. So if you have registered for our June Lunch and Learn event, there was a brief discrepancy. The title of Activities of Daily Living is actually going to be scheduled for our August 12th Lunch and Learn. With that being said, the correct title of our June Lunch and Learn will be Navigating Early Interventions and Beyond for Early Childhood Providers, and all will be welcome to attend that as well. We just wanted to make sure to let folks know because it was incorrectly listed on our flyer. So you'll have an opportunity for that activities of daily living. You'll just have to wait a few months longer, and we'll have that ready for you in August. We will be placing links in the chat for today of the PowerPoint or resources that will be used. Feel free to grab those. If you're unable to grab those links, no fear, we'll send out an email. All of that will be provided to you. And please take care of your needs throughout today's training. If you need to step away or take care of something, please do that. This is recorded and will be uploaded to our website at a later time. And now I'm going to pass things over to Eileen, and she is going to jump right in.
Hello, my name is Eileen. I am Kentucky Spin's early childhood parent educator. I am a parent to 4 children, 3 of which have different disabilities, ADHD, autism, cerebral palsy, and some other things sprinkled in there. So today we're going to be talking about mental health in education. And just to kind of start off, I'm going to say that if at any time that you have questions or there's something that you feel like needs to be addressed, you can put something in the chat. But also that when we talk about mental health, we always defer to the professionals. And so to make sure that if you do have very serious questions or concerns, to always contact your pediatrician or your mental health specialist. So that being said, we're just going to go over defining mental health and education. So mental health includes emotional, psychological, and social well-being. It affects the learning capabilities, the social interactions, and the behavioral responses of a child inside of an educational setting. Some of the common challenges that we see in education are anxiety, depression, attention deficit hyperactivity disorder or ADHD, trauma-related issues, different disabilities, body dysmorphia, and more. These are not something that we just consider as like a personal issue for a student because these issues do affect the learning of that child. And so we're going to kind of go over what we're going to be doing in these types of situations when you are looking at that and trying to figure out what's going on with a child and what steps you can do to try and help the child. And so the first thing we're going to do is we're going to do those observations in the behavior. So we're going to be recognizing those signs of mental health needs. So some of those signs you're going to see those emotional signs. So sometimes it's going to be that persistent sadness or that long lasting sadness. Anxiety, and it looks different in all different types of kids. Sometimes anxiety is something that they can talk about and they use their words and their emotions. Sometimes anxiety manifests itself as a physical symptoms like a stomach ache or a headache, um, personality changes or altered moods, and an excessive worrying and more. Some of the academic signs you may see if you're starting to recognize those mental health needs might be a drop in grades. Kids that were getting A's all of a sudden drop down to C's. Kids that aren't turning in assignments might be an indication of mental health issues. Having trouble focusing, behavioral concerns. So what can you do if you start seeing these signs? This is where you're going to want to start documenting those observations that you're seeing. How do we see that these things are happening? Is checking in with the children that you're working with. You can't tell if something's off if we don't really see that child in the beginning to know where their baseline is. Um, Collaborate with other educators and other teachers because the observations that you have in your classroom or in one setting may look different to another teacher, or it could be the same. And maybe that's something that with that communication can open up those lines of seeing what else is going on. Is there something else we need to really be looking at? And always to go back and seek student input. Obviously, you want to make this into like a private conversation with a student. This isn't something that we do in the middle of a classroom, but pulling somebody aside and actually trying to get an idea of how they're doing for the day. What is going on? What are the things that they have going on in their life and what's most important to them? And so if you have something like these check-ins to know where that student's baseline is, that's going to give you a much better idea of where that student is heading. So if something changes, that we know that something's different and that maybe we need to step in. So for the next slide, we're going to go over the educational impact of the academic and that functional performance. So when we're talking about mental health in schools, you do have that academic performance. That's going to be your test scores and your schoolwork, the grades that we all look at when we kind of think of academics. But it's not just that academic performance, it's also the functional performance inside of a school. So that includes the emotional regulation, attention, behavior, communication needs. So the example we gave here is a student with ADHD at home, they may have their own setup so that way they've minimized distractions and that they can sit down and complete work and they have a wiggle chair and they have a system. But at school, that child struggles to focus inside of the class if they don't have certain things like the accommodations or modifications so that they can perform well inside of school. So a lot of the things that you're going to be doing when you do have a concern, it all kind of follows the same sort of theme, where when you observe that behavior, you're going to want to gather that data, see what's going on, because that's what we're going to be able to use and be able to point to show, hey, maybe we need to do something or we need to step in. Identify what the concern is. Talking with that child directly to see if they see those concerns themselves or if they see it differently. talking with the individual teachers and teachers collaborating with each other to see if these concerns happen over multiple areas inside of the school and at home. And then, of course, there's also making that referral to a school support team for those mental health supports. So with the next slide, we're going to talk about child find. So it's the school's duty to identify students. So under the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, or IDEA, schools must identify and support students with potential disabilities, including mental health concerns. So the reason that we say potential disabilities is that having a diagnosis is a privilege that not everyone can afford to have. So the school needs to be able to see a concern with a child, and then they should be able to step in and try and address that. We know that early intervention improves outcomes. So the sooner that we get help and support, the better the outcomes are for families and for children. Schools assess the needs based on the educational and the functional impact, not just based on that medical diagnosis. Medical diagnosis is a great tool and it can give us an idea of what's going on. But at the end of the day, we always shift our focus back to that individual child and seeing what that child needs to be successful in school. So if you do suspect that your child has some sort of disability or something that is affecting their learning, we wrote here on the side that these are kind of like the steps that you go through when you want to talk to the school and address it. So the first thing is recognizing that there's a concern. Noticing that the schools have that duty to identify students who might have some sort of disability. Making that written request for an evaluation. So the evaluations, those are going to include your screenings, tests, observations, assessments, all that to understand what's going on with your child. The school should send a notice of consent to the parents saying, hey, we're going to test this child, see what's going on, and see how to gather that data to see where they are in school, get their baseline. And then the team determines eligibility, whether or not they could be referred for special education, or whether or not that maybe a 504 plan would be better suited for that child to make reasonable accommodations to their day. So on the next slide, we're going to touch briefly on supporting students and mental health with the Kentucky MTSS, which is the Kentucky's multi-tiered system of supports. Ooh, it is a mouthful. It used to be referred to as RTI, or response to intervention, but this is the new model and how they're referring to it. And so this is a tiered system of supports that's set up to help all students, especially those who might need extra support with learning or behavior or mental health. So it's a tier, you can kind of see in the middle, but tier 1 is help for all students. So this is like your general things that are available to all students. So sometimes it's like school rules or kindness lessons, or Leader in Me program is one that's really big right now in a lot of different school districts. So these are things that the school's doing across the entire school to try and help children. Tier 2 is going to be that extra help or that extra support in small groups or short term. So this might be meeting with a counselor if you have certain concerns or mental health issues. And then tier 3 is when you're going to get individualized to give help that needs a student that needs more support, and that's going to look to be more of a one-on-one. So same, just like with how we were talking before, it's going to kind of go through that same system. We have to talk to the teacher or the counselor. We need to tell them those concerns about your child's mental health or their schoolwork. You're going to ask for support in writing. You can write a short note or an email explaining that your child might need to get an evaluation to get some extra help. You're going to want to join those meetings. The school should be inviting you to those meetings to talk about a plan to come up with for your child inside a school. And then to check in. It's not just, a set it and forget it. This is something that constantly moves and changes. So you want to make sure that you're involved, that you're talking with the school and you're having good communication with the school and seeing how your child is doing, and that you're all best supporting. Next up, we're going to talk briefly about 504 plans. So a 504 plan is meant to provide accommodations for students with physical or mental impairments that substantially limit one major life activity. Um, we literally could not list all the life activities because it doesn't affect walking, bending, chewing, sitting, standing, talking, reading, any of those things. If it's affected, then that might be something that you might get a 504 with some accommodations. So it's based on the Section 504 of the Rehabilitation Act. Parents can request a 504 evaluation in writing if you believe that your child needs reasonable accommodations to have equal access to meet their learning needs. So you have that parent-teacher referral. The school's going to hold a meeting. They're going to review any health records, the teacher's input, the students' input about how school is going, the parents' input. And then if they're eligible, then you would be able to create a 504 plan for that student. Once you make that plan, which would have those accommodations like maybe a movement break or maybe whatever that student needs so that they can stay in that educational setting and access education is what is needed. And then the teacher then would implement those accommodations. So some accommodation examples we have here, like extended time on tests, flexible deadlines, breaks during the day. I like having things like movement breaks and wiggle seats and cushions. So that way, students who do have, like if you have ADHD and you need more sensory or movement, they're able to accommodate that, but still keep that child in the same educational setting and be able to participate and access education like their peers are. So that is for 504s. Next up is going to be IEPs, or the Individual Education Program. And so this is when it's not just an accommodation that your child needs to access education. This is for students that are going to need that specially designed instruction and those related services due to their qualifying disability. So mental health related disability eligibility categories under IEP might be emotional and behavioral, other health impairment, autism. There is 13 categories that separate into who's eligible for special education or the IEP itself. And this is all going to depend on what is going on with that student that would require them to need that specially designed instruction or that specialized education so that they can access education like their peers are. So we just had the example, a student with severe anxiety is impacting the classroom participation. So maybe we need to have something for that student, specialized instruction. So this is the little circle. I love this little circle because it describes everything we do, because you're going to start in that top right corner where, just like we talked before, you're going to make a referral, preferably in writing. From that referral, they're going to get an evaluation. They're going to say, is this child, let's do the observations, the assessments, the screenings, whatever it is, to see, what's going on with this child. Where are they presently at? That's going to then give us the data to determine if they're eligible for something like an IEP or a 504. If they're determined eligible, you make the IEP, you find the supports, you make the right instructions, and then from there, you determine where that takes place in the general education classroom, in a special education classroom, dependent whatever that child needs. And then from there, that child is now in the school with the right accommodations, with the right specially designed instructions, so that child is supported and able to continue with school. So that's kind of the whole thing, is that you ask for help, you sign off on getting those tests. They look at the test, you determine if you're eligible, and then you make the plan. So the next slide here we're just going to kind of go over like the differences, because this is what we hear a lot, is why would I need one and not the other? So 504 plans are based off of the Section 504 of the Rehabilitation Act. as opposed to the IEPs, which is going to be the Individuals with Disability Education Act. The reason why I think it's important to understand this is that if you have concerns or you want to go back to the source material, you want to go back to who wrote that legislation, where did it come from? And they come from two separate places. So 504 plan is going to give you those accommodations and supports. Like we talked about, extended time is a really frequent one that we see quite often, extended time or double time movement breaks. And the difference between that 504 plan and the IEP is going to give you specialized education. That is where the education is going to need to be given in a different way so that child can access it. Eligibility for a 504 plan, it just needs to impact one or more major life activities. That's when we talked about the moving, breathing, eating, standing, sitting, all that, whatever that affects, then a 504 might be appropriate, as opposed to an IEP where the child's disability needs to show, or you need to have it show that that disability affects that child from accessing education. And then that's why we're going to have to step in and make sure that this child is able to receive the education. And so, well, look at that. The example for the 504 is going to be extended test time because that's giving a small accommodation to a child, as opposed to an IEP where if they needed specialized speech therapy, counseling. But in addition to that, you can also have some of those accommodations that are used in 504 plans, like extended time, can also be a part of the IEP. So if there's parts of a 504, it could still be in that IEP, but it doesn't go the other way because the IEP is specialized education.
And
Oh,
Eileen, I just want to throw in there too for folks that the IEP is also covered under Section 504. There are protections at a federal level as well, too, just to add that in there.
perfect. Yeah, it's complicated, but it's one of those things that we do want to make sure that you know where you're going back to for information. Thank you so much, Amber. So I guess for the next slide, so accommodations and support. So parents, teachers, school staff, we can all work together to find that right support plan. So we just gave some different examples. So for testing, maybe that they have breaks, they have extended time or a separate location. In the classroom, maybe it's movement breaks, use of fidgets inside of school is really popular too. Visual schedules, preferential seating. I love preferential seating because it's not necessarily what's preferred for the teacher, it's what's preferred for that child. So if that child needs a seat to the side, then that's what's preferred for that child. So it's making sure that it's going to benefit them. Schedule changes addressed ahead of time in the classroom. So emotional, having access to a counselor, having a check-in with a trusted adult, having those trusted adults in school and knowing that somebody cares about you helps kids feel like that they're a part of a community and can really help with mental health. Using positive behavioral supports and accessing calming techniques. Sometimes there's skills that we think that kids should know, and sometimes we forget that we need to teach those skills. So mental health, there's school counseling. There could be the functional behavioral assessment, which is if we have behaviors that are concerning and we need to find the root cause of them. That can lead to getting a behavioral intervention plan, where if we know certain behaviors occur under certain times, then maybe we can be proactive in trying to stop that behavior beforehand by giving appropriate supports. There's also music therapy, and then there's group or individualized therapy out there as well. But it really does come down to being individualized for each student. These are just examples, but it's going to be a collaborative communication between the student, the adults, the school, the parents, the caregivers, to understand what is it going to take to make sure that this student is supported appropriately, so that way they can access education inside of school. So again, it's that collaborative communication, that collaborating is really what makes that student success. It is a team's approach. Because, you know, the first person that we're talking about here is that individual student. And so encouraging self-advocacy for them to speak out when they do need help or when they do need something, like learning how to speak up for yourself is an entire skill that, so I know grown people who still don't have it. So that's something to think that we need to help teach your children, especially if they're having difficulty reaching out. But it's like I said, it's the parents, it's the educators, there's school psychologists, it's your private therapist. All of this is part of the group that's meant to be there to help support kids. Next, we have part of that is going to be reducing stigma and building a supportive school culture. Um, Creating an environment where students feel safe discussing mental health is so important, because if you don't have that avenue or that access to speak to somebody when there's something going on, you know, it's the squeaky wheel gets the grease. So if nobody knows that it's a problem and nobody knows to look for it, because it's a whole culture, you know, it's about changing that. Training staff in mental health awareness, promoting resources and different coping strategies. And then there's also schools should be able to provide clear guidance on how to access mental health services inside of the school. Um, Regardless, I think on the next slide here, we do have different resources to reach out to when you do have mental health crises, because again, while there's always the professionals that you need to look to, like calling 988, which is the suicide and crisis helpline, which is always open. And just even like letting kids know that there is something out there and available, because it may not always be parents, but it should be somebody that they can trust and reach out to and can know or notice when something is off and that they need some extra help and assistance. I guess I'll ask. I don't know if anyone has any questions or.
Um, Let me check here. We'll give just a moment so that if there are any questions, folks have enough time to get those into the chat. But as always, I'll run through our ending. So while folks are typing questions, if there are any, there is a QR code on the screen, as well as an evaluation link that will be placed in the chat. We do ask that everyone complete that evaluation. We want to hear from you. We want to know, what did you like? What did you not so like? What would you like to hear more of? Maybe there's a topic out there that's affecting you and your family, and you would like some more information on that. Please let us know. Once the evaluation has been completed, you will receive a certificate of attendance for attending today. And our contact information is on the screen. Please feel free to reach out if you have any questions about today's material, or if you have an issue that you're working through right now and you just need some guidance or assistance on how to move forward in your journey or your youth's journey. We're here for you. And we always say, hey, check out our social media pages, our website. We offer a lot of valuable resources that you can work with your youth, as well as yourself, that can help you navigate some life decisions or choices that you're making. I'm going to jump back to the chat real quick to make sure we don't overlook any questions, and I am not seeing any at this time. So we do want to thank you for coming out and spending some of your lunchtime with us today and learning how to navigate some of those options and plans that are in schools to help support our youth with mental health diagnoses, or maybe your youth doesn't have a diagnosis yet and you think there's a suspected diagnoses. I know Eileen did a wonderful job going through this with us today, but just know there doesn't have to be an actual diagnosis if your student is being affected, their education is being affected. And this is something we can help walk you through too. But we're glad you came and we look forward to seeing you back next month.